I don't have an intro this time, just watch the video. Many of you have probably heard of Izanami and Izanagi, Amaterasu, Susanoo, and Tsukuyomi from the popular anime and manga Naruto. You have probably guessed that these jutsus are based off of Japanese mythology, and I would love to explore them with you. Today, we'll be talking about the Japanese creation myth and the gods that came from it. Izanami, she who invites, and Izanagi, he who invites, are the seventh and last generation of deities that descended from the Kotoamatsu kami. They were entrusted in completing the land. There are two Japanese chronicles that talk about Izanami and Izanagi, the Kojiki and the Nihon Shoki, in which there are slight differences to their myth. The Kojiki, or the Record of Ancient Matters, is the oldest written chronicle of Japanese myths and the origins of the Japanese archipelago. It is written using Chinese characters to convey sounds, and the Kojiki is mainly composed of songs and poems. The Nihon Shoki, or the Chronicles of Japan, is the second oldest chronicle and is much more detailed in comparison to the Kojiki. It is also written in Chinese since at the time, Japan hadn't developed its written language yet, hiragana and katakana. A short linguistics bit.
Now, yes.
Japanese kanji usually, not always, have two pronunciations, onyomi and kunyomi. Onyomi is derived from the Chinese pronunciation, while kunyomi is from indigenous Japanese. If you take this kanji, it is pronounced as ten in Japanese, but it looks familiar, doesn't it? That's because it's in Amaterasu's name. The pronunciation derived from the Chinese word for 10 is actually ame or ama. It makes sense since Japan was using China's writing system at the time, right? There's a lot more to it than just that, but that isn't this video. Anyways, it's considered to be the more complete version of the Japanese chronicle and contains more details than the Kojiki. It is speculated that the Kojiki was written for more of an entertainment purpose, while the Nihon Shoki takes a more anthropological approach. While standing on a bridge to heaven, known as Ama no Hashidate, Izanami and Izanagi slowly stirred a jewel-encrusted naginata into the ocean, and upon lifting it, the drops created the Onogoro Island, a dwelling called Ama no Mihashira, or Heavenly Pillar, was erected on the island. The pair then descended onto Onogoro and realized they were meant to procreate. They devised a wedding ceremony in which they would walk in opposite directions around the pillar, greet each other, and then procreate. After circling the pillar, it was Izanami who spoke first, which Izanagi objected to since he was the man. This resulted in the creation of Hiruko, later referred to as Ebisu, or Leech Child, and Izanagi and Izanami set him adrift. Ebisu would then become the patron of fishermen. This first mistake, created by Izanami, can be interpreted as culturally significant in terms of the imbalance between men and women.
What's wrong again?
Although the existence of Amaterasu may counteract this imbalance, or not, but that's for a whole different video. The second time around, Izanagi greeted Izanami first, and thus various islands of the Japanese archipelago were born, and Izanagi and Izanami were now sibling spouses. The Nihon Shoki lists the islands being born in this order: Awaji, Oyamato, Toya Akitsushima, Iyo, Tsukushi, Oki, and Sado, born as twins; Koshi, what is now known as the Hokuriku region; Oshima, identified with the island of Suoshima in Yamaguchi Prefecture; Kimi no Kushima, identified with the Kojima Peninsula in southern Okayama Prefecture; Tsushima, and Iki. As you can tell, some of these places are not islands at all, but regions. Some scholars speculate that they were included to catalog the regions, and not just the islands. Izanagi and Izanami then went on to create the rest of the islands of Japan. A few other deities were born after the islands as well. Most notably was Kagutsuchi, who, because of his fierce heat, had killed Izanami in the process of birth. Furious, Izanagi kills Kagusuchi with his sword, Ame no Ohabari. Either the blood spraying from his decapitated head, or the pieces of his body that were sliced. Various kami and mountains, including volcanoes, were created. Devastated by the death of his wife, Izanagi impulsively follows her into Yomi no Kuni, or the underworld. Once he found his wife in the underworld, Izanami informs her husband that she cannot return with him because she has already eaten the food of the underworld. Izanami told Izanagi that as long as he didn't look at her, she would try to ask the gods of Yomi if she could leave. Understandably, Izanagi was stunned, but he agreed and waited. Izanami was taking a long time, so Izanagi went to look for her again. This time, he lit a fire for light, and what he saw was a decomposing corpse. Surprised and horrified, Izanagi made the decision to flee Yomi, but not before Izanami, through embarrassment, created 8 Thunder Kami. She then sent the Yomutsu Shikome, or female Yomi, after Izanagi as he ran. Izanagi threw his headdress and comb at the Yomi, which turned into grapes and bamboo. The Yomi stopped to eat, so Izanami sent the Thunder Kami after him next. He threw peaches at the Thunder Kami, which were thought of to have evil banishing powers, causing them to run away. Izanami and Izanagi met where the land of the living and the land of the dead connect. Izanagi lifts a boulder and blocks Izanami's path forward. Over this rock, Izanami yells that if Izanagi leaves her, she will kill 1,000 people per day, in which Izanagi retorts by saying he'll ensure 1,500 people a day are born. Shut up! That was the last day the once lovers saw each other, and Izanagi became the ruler of the living, and Izanami became the ruler of the dead. After escaping Yomi, Izanagi performs a cleansing ritual called misogi in a river. From this ritual, he created 23 kami, and an additional 3 kami that you are most familiar with. Amaterasu was born after Izanagi washed his left eye, Tsukuyomi after Izanagi washed his right eye, and Susanoo after he washed his nose. Amaterasu is the sun goddess, and is often considered to be the chief kami of the Shinto faith. Her birth differs slightly, depending on the Kojiki or the Nihon Shoki. In the Kojiki, Amaterasu, along with her brothers, Tsukuyomi and Susanoo, were born after Izanagi bathed in the Tachibana River to purify himself after visiting Yomi. Amaterasu is then appointed by her father to rule Takamagahara, the plane of high heaven. The Nihon Shoki describes Izanami and Izanagi procreating after they finished creating the Japanese archipelago. From them, Amaterasu, Tsukuyomi, Hiruko, and Susanoo are born. One of the most popular Amaterasu stories involves her and her brother, Susanoo. As with most siblings, the relationship was filled with bickering, mostly on Susanoo's part. Just as the storms he represents and being a little brother, Susanoo is chaotic and wreaks havoc amongst the heavens. In both the Nihon Shoki and the Kojiki, Susanoo is banished from the heavens because of his behavior, for crying because he missed his mother and causing the rivers to dry up, or for just being destructive in nature. Regardless, before his descent to Earth, Susanoo wished to visit his sister. Amaterasu, knowing her brother's character, is weary once he reaches Takamagahara. To guard herself, she approaches him in male clothing and armor. But when Susanoo proposes a trial by pledge, or yukei, to prove he was there out of sincerity, Amaterasu agrees.
Wait a damn minute. Wait a damn...
During this pledge, each god chews and spits out an object in their possession. Again, this object differs in the Shoki or Kojiki. Both accounts recall Amaterasu breaking Susanoo's sword, Totsuke no Tsurugi, into 3, chewing them and spat out 3 goddesses, Taguri Hime, Ichikishi Mahime, and Tagitsu Hime. Susanoo took the strings from Amaterasu's Magatama beads, chewed them,
so good and tasty?
and spat out 5 male gods, Ame no Oshihomi ni, Ame no Hoi, Amatsuhikone, Ikutsuhikone, and Kumana no Kusubi. There are a few variants in both chronicles. but this story seems to be the most well-known. Now, the classic sibling bickering begins. Amaterasu laid claim to the male deities because they were born from her necklace strings. The three goddesses were Susanoo's, since they were produced from his sword. Side note, these deities are considered Susanoo and Amaterasu's children. I will talk more about Amaterasu's children later. Susanoo, declaring he had won and the purity of his actions were valid, he raged with victory and began destroying his sister's palace. He destroyed the rice fields, defecated in her palace, and even threw the heavenly horse at Amaterasu's loom, killing one of her favorite maidens. This, unsurprisingly, enraged Amaterasu, and she fled to Ama-no-Iwato, or Heavenly Rock Cave, throwing the heavens and earth into total darkness. The god of wisdom, Omoikane, conceived a plan to lure her back out of the cave. Objects of offerings were brought by Futotama no Mikoto. Ame no Koyane no Mikoto recited Onorito, or liturgical text, while Ame no Tajikarao no Kami stood near the door. Ame no Uzume no Mikoto created a scene by becoming divinely possessed and exposing herself, causing the 800 deities to laugh all at once. Inside the cave, Amaterasu is surprised that the gods were so happy while she was absent. She asked why the gods were so happy, and they replied by saying they were celebrating the birth of a god greater than her. Curious, she slid the boulder blocking the entrance and peeked out. Ame no Koyane and Futotama brought up the Yamata no Kagami and held it up so she could see her reflection. Struck by her reflection, she approached the mirror and reached out, causing Ame no Tajikarao to grab her hand and pull her out of the cave.
When I catch you, Ricky, Ricky, when I catch you, Ricky, Ricky, when I catch you, Ricky, Ricky, when I catch you, Ricky.
The cave was then immediately sealed with a straw rope, Shimenawa, preventing her from ever returning inside. And thus, the light was returned to the heavens and the earth. As punishment for Susanoo creating such a disaster, he is banished to earth, specifically Izumo. Once in Izumo, Susanoo meets an elderly couple who tell him they are the children of the earthly deity known as Oyamatsumi, Ashinazuchi, and Tenazuchi. They inform Susanoo that the monstrous serpent known as Yamata no Orochi had eaten 7 of their 8 daughters, and it was soon to eat their 8th, Kushinarahime. Susanoo asks if the couple will give him their daughter in return for saving her, in which they are hesitant, but eventually agree to. Susanoo then transforms Kushinarahime into a comb and inserts it into his hair knot. He then instructs Ashinazuchi and Tenazuchi to distill 8 full barrels of sake and leave them out for the serpent and wait. The couple made the preparations just as instructed, and just as Susanoo foretold, the serpent appeared at the barrels. It dunked 8 heads into 8 barrels and drank to the point of becoming drunk and laying down to sleep. Susanoo sprung to action and chopped the serpent into pieces. The serpent's tail did not cut through all the way, and upon further inspection, a sword was found within its flesh. This sword was Kusanagi, and Susanoo presented the brilliant sword to Amaterasu, supposedly as an apology. Susanoo and Kushinarahime then settled down in a place called Suga, taken from the Japanese word for refreshing, Suga Sugashi. Here, they construct a shrine. Susanoo is the god of the sea and storms, and is seen as a contradictory god, good and bad, and chaotic and heroic, all at once. But where is Tsukuyomi? Unlike most middle children, he is usually calm, and therefore, he rarely appears in the Nihon Shoki and the Kojiki. Maybe because the moon is typically calming, depending on who you ask. The most notable story involving Tsukuyomi is the death of Ukemochi no Kami. Ukemochi no Kami is a goddess associated with food. Amaterasu sent Tsukuyomi, in the Kojiki it is Susanoo, to go and meet with the goddess on earth. The goddess then vomited boiled rice on the land, fish towards the sea, and game towards the forest. She then presented these foods to Tsukuyomi in a banquet, but once Tsukuyomi found out that Ukemochi no Kami offered him her vomit, he slayed her.
Slay! Slay!
Once Tsukuyomi returned to heaven and reported what had happened, Amaterasu was furious and stated that they shall never communicate face to face ever again. This is why the sun and the moon are never seen together. Ukemochi no Kami's death created numerous foods and animals from her body, such as cows and horses, silkworms, millet, and rice. The reason for Tsukuyomi being omitted from so many stories is because he represents order and etiquette. Either way, he's important, regardless if he isn't in every story that his siblings are in. We once again witness a pattern with mythology. Some of the stories vary slightly. In this case though, the differences aren't very extreme and the general story is understood. I really enjoyed reading about the Japanese creation myth. One thing that I found very interesting besides the story as a whole was the first emperor of Japan, Jimmu, was said to be a descendant of Amaterasu. She asked her son, Ame no Oshihoimimi, to govern Earth, but he twice refused and instead offered his son, Ninigi no Mikoto, to do it instead. Amaterasu gave Ninigi 3 gifts: the Yasakani, to help him on his descent, a jewel, or pearls or magatama beads, the Yata, the mirror used to entice Amaterasu from the cave, and the Kusanagi sword. These 3 gifts were considered Ninigi's power, and they became the imperial regalia for his noble descendants. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, let me know if I missed anything. There was a lot in Chinese which I cannot read nor speak, so I know I missed some things. And of course, there are different tellings. As I mentioned previously, they are similar enough to understand the stories, but there are some differences. I'd love to know what you thought about the Japanese creation myth. My camera's about to die, so I will say thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate you, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!